Maybe you have a Selenium task to do and you haven't put much thought into it. Now would be the best time to let ChatGPT take the first cut at it. Now the question is, how do you get ChatGPT to write Selenium code for you if it can't get to your web page? Well, we can do it like this. Let's say I got this shopping cart and I want to grab the items from this cart and validate the math. I'll tell ChatGPT, using Selenium Python, extract the values from the price, quantity, and total columns from the following HTML. Then using Chrome Dev Tool, I'm going to try to find this table in the code. I can see that this table has an ID, so I know that Selenium can operate on this table without needing to know its parent or ancestors. We don't want to feed too much to ChatGPT because there's some kind of limitation on the input box. Plus, the more you try to feed to it, the more likely it's going to get confused. Okay, now I'm going to copy the table. As you can see here, after the colon, I hit Shift Enter to get to the next line, and then I just pasted the table in there. Okay, here's the generated code. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it into Visual Studio Code. If you haven't yet set up your Python and Selenium environment, check out my install guide. The link is going to be in the description. I'm going to remove this line because I want to keep the browser open. I'm going to move the code that opens the browser to its own code block. Update the target to my local site. And then run the code. Alright, let me add two things to the shopping cart. And then I'll go to my cart. Let me zoom in. And then I'll put VS Code side by side. Now I can run the second code block. There's an exception. Let's see what it says. Looks like find element by ID is not a function. As of this recording, ChatGPT has knowledge up to 2021. So over the past 2 years, Selenium has stopped supporting some of the functions. I tried to ask it to revise the code using the latest version of Selenium. Apparently 4.1 is as latest as it's gonna get, and it's still using the find element by ID function. I tried once more to ask it to use the find element function instead of the find element by ID function. Let's see the code. So it does know how to use the find element function. Let me get the code starting from the table. I'm going to replace this code. Run it. Looks pretty good. Now let me change the quantity and see what happens. Run it again. Hey, it's able to pick it up. We should be aware that at its current state, ChatGPT is wrong a lot. So it's still up to us to make sure the code is correct. Just because it runs and the output looks good doesn't necessarily mean that there are no potential bugs. I'm going to review the code to make sure there's no obvious problems. The first line is getting the cart table by ID, which is good. However, this first parameter should be using a constant rather than a string. Let me import the by class. Run it, and then replace this with the constant. After it finds the HTML table, it finds all the rows within the table. Again, this one should be by.tagName. Now it's going to loop through all the rows and find each cell. Correct this one as well. It's smart enough to only process the rows with 4 columns, which is good. So it's skipping everything under here. And then it grabs the price, quantity, and total from cells 1, 2, and 3. So this is cell 0, 1, 2, and 3. So this looks good. The next thing I did was to ask ChatGPT to multiply the price and quantity and then check if the result is the same as the total column. I could have done this easily myself, but I think I turned off my brain for a second and wanted ChatGPT to do everything for me. So what happened was it returned code that looks completely different from what it gave me before. It's also using find element by XPath, which we know is not going to work. I tried asking it to use find elements instead of find elements by XPath, just to see if it'll give me code that's similar to what it gave me before, but it didn't. Now, since I just validated the code in Visual Studio Code a few minutes ago, I'm not going to replace that with this. But I will make use of some of this code, like stripping out the $sign, converting quantity into an integer, the calculation, and also I like this assert statement. So let me transfer all these over. Ideally, we want ChatGPT to keep building on the code that it initially gave us, but it doesn't look like it's gonna happen. So it's best to salvage what we can and move on. Okay, I got what I need. Let's run this code. The assert statement failed. Looks like the code to compare the total against the expected total is not correct. ChatGPT kind of knows that it's gonna compare two floats and kind of not. Let me fix this by getting rid of this string conversion. Also, I need to round them to the same decimal places in order to make the comparison possible. Parse the cell value as a float. Might as well do that up here too. And let's see what happens. The assert statement passed, so we don't see anything down here. Now, even though I'm not going to use this code, I see it's using a function called zip, which I'm not familiar with. I'm going to take this opportunity to ask ChatGPT what this is. So I say, what is zip? It's smart enough to know that I'm referring to the zip function in the code that it just produced for me. I actually went through this explanation. It's actually pretty good. At this point, the code to validate the line item totals is done. What remains is to take the item before tax, add the tips, and verify that it does equal to the cart total. But I'm going to take my earlier advice of not being lazy, and I can actually just use find element by ID and grab these three numbers pretty easily and just do the validation myself. So I'm not going to bore you with that. Well, I hope this video helped you integrate ChatGPT into your Selenium Python development. If you learned something today, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.